Welcome to Leading Minds Revealed, the podcast that pulls back the curtain on how today's top leaders harness the power of mindfulness to conquer the fast-paced, ever-changing world of business. In each episode, we sit down with C-suite executives and leaders who share their strategies for navigating rapid change with skill and clarity. Join us as we uncover the transformative mindsets that drive extraordinary leadership. These insights aren't found in business books, and they'll revolutionize the way you lead. And now, here's your host, Michael Apollo.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Leading Minds Revealed. In today's episode, we're going to talk about how embracing diversity in age, culture, and thought can unlock high performance, why younger generations are rethinking the rules of work, and how leading with vulnerability can transform organizational cultures. My guest today is a global leader who has spent over 2 decades helping organizations build cultures of inclusion, resilience, and innovation. Most recently, she served as Vice President of HR at Rose Life Science, a pioneer in the cannabis industry. She brings an insightful lens of lived experience, strategic insight, and heartfelt storytelling. With that, meet my guest, Gabi Loureiro. Welcome to the show, Gabi.
Hi, Michael. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to be here and talk to you. Very, very,
Likewise.
very nice. Very good.
I know, and recently we spoke while you're in Brazil, and so now you are up in Canada.
Correct.
So lovely to have this opportunity to just sort of connect anywhere we are in the world, and I'd love
It-
to just dive right into our conversation, and I was really fascinated about the breadth of experience that you've had, working within different organizations, and especially your understanding of and real deep focus on diversity, inclusion, but from a very unique lens. And especially right now when diversity, equity, inclusion is a really charged topic,
Yes, a
you
hundred
know, and 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 I,
percent. Yeah.
and I think there's also I think it's charged from different domains that don't really maybe understand it fully. And so why, when you're thinking from a leadership position within an organization,
hmm
you have a highly driven executive. Why would they want to consider embracing diversity of people, diversity of perspectives, diversity of generations in their leadership style today?
Yeah, I think that's it's honestly, I think it's a great question because it's a question that almost every leader should be asking themselves right now, right? I believe that the world had definitely turned after pandemic. Everybody had to rethink about their ways of working. So I think it was a starting point of like those reflections of like where can I work, who can I work with, because everybody was in solitude, like to a certain degree. So those reflections, they came in a very speedy way, I would say. I think that it is statistical proven that all organizations are more performing when there is a diverse team working for them. When you're thinking about globalization, the remote possibility of like work, the more integration of not only generations but like across countries, cultures. If I believe that if you don't think about diversity and inclusion, right, you're not favoring your company. That's point final to me, right? Not talking about the human perspective. If you're talking about productive and being like functional, everybody has a different point of view, and a different perspective and a different breadth of like what solutions could happen when they listen to different perspectives, right? And I feel that is a propeller of of organizations that want to be performing, right? On a human level, I feel that like it is an opportunity to engage, right? I feel that everything that you mentioned, right? Age, diversity, gender, it was brought like in a very bubble of like a conversation. And I believe that people are not quite yet equipped to talk about those things. And I believe that this is a definitely a challenge for our generation, our generation of leaders right now, because if you're not able to engage in those conversations and bring diversity with reality perspective into your conversations and genuine and authentic, you're missing out, right? Like you're definitely missing out. And to me it is like just putting two pieces very important together. Companies are actually people, right? They are a representation of like people. So if we don't, and right now every generation has the opportunity, I feel, to break boundaries to certain degrees. Like past my past generation, I'm generation X, it was like definitely women at work, right? Like that was something that we had to leave that breach, like to a certain degree of like a performance of like society. Right now we have like the opportunity to breach like those boundaries even further, right? Gender, cultures, religions, and really have like a good conversations around it. Otherwise I don't think that we can progress as a societal form of functioning.
Yeah, I know it's fascinating, thinking about the performance potential of diversifying your workforce and even the people that you surround yourself with, right?
Yes.
And when you think about um, like what is the opposite of creating a diverse pool of people around you? It's existing in an echo chamber. So you're just surrounding yourself with people and perspectives and viewpoints that mimic your own. And I mean, you can risk. That's a big risk that can you can bring in by not having an inclusive representation of what society is, especially if you're a global company.
Yes, a
And
hundred percent, a hundred
and
percent.
and so those viewpoints, you can miss out on those perspectives of different ways of viewing the world, different markets that you can enter, different ideas for innovation. You might miss a person that can call you out
Yeah.
for maybe a viewpoint that isn't taking consideration some issues within the organization or some opportunities that are available.
I
And
think that
it's yeah.
Brené Brown, right, like talked about that aspect of being vulnerable, right? In the past 10 years, I think that has been a more present conversation. It starts being vulnerable, right? I feel that like people have like really that challenge of being vulnerable, and they lose out the opportunity or the understanding of like opportunity, that by showing that they're not there yet, other people would have the courage, or like and unfortunately still the word courage, to say this is the way I am, this is the person who I am in totality. And that brings like a completely different game into organizations, because when you are actually able to be who you are in total without boundaries, it's not that everything that you believe it's going to be accepted. And I think that's the fear that people have, is like I have like to accept other ways of like thinking. It's not acceptance, it's just understanding. Because when understands when somebody understands other, like conversations are different, because like the goal of like the outcome of like that conversation is different. I mentioned to you like the last time that I was in Brazil and talking about diversity, right? That like I was in a building, and São Paulo is a very big city and there's a lot of like buildings. And it was a building that of my friend, and they were in a breakfast together, like just to meet each other because they couldn't have like that chance. And there was a lot of like conversations about the difference of like a generation with like the generation Z's right now, and the perception, and it was a lot of like people that more gen X's like on the table, and they were talking and saying that that's the current generation, that they're very fearful because the current generation doesn't want to work. It's a 9 to 5 and get out of like here. I don't want that. And I was just listening because I was not even invited. Like I was just like a invited guest to that meeting, to that breakfast. And at one point, I couldn't help myself. And I said, are we doing the same things that every generation is doing? Like we just criticize the next generation and we're not like put them together in the conversation, because that is the beauty of it, right? When we're talking about it, when we put like all those pieces together, it's not about like that. To me, it's not that they don't want to work. They just saw their parents getting sick at work with burnouts and things, and not balancing work and life in a in a in a well way, right, in a wellness perspective. And they don't want to do the same thing. They're smart people, right, like us, like other generations thought they were, and believe that they knew more than the previous generations. It would be amazing when people are actually able to connect the dots and have like those perspectives together, because and then it comes to exactly the point that you were saying, that enriches like the workspace environment. It enriches every environment when you open your mind and you actually open your heart to listen to a story that not necessarily is the same as yours, but produces learnings around it. That's a little bit of my view, and a little bit of like a lot of like what I would like to talk in this uh, moment of my career and life. It's that perspective of like doing things differently and connecting, and actually having meaningful conversations throughout different generations, different age groups, different genders. It's critical for performance, and it's critical for everybody to actually have like a pleasant life. Generations, the generation that current generation, they're fearful of like what's ahead of them. They don't know if the planet is going to still be the way that they want. They really are seeing drastic changes in the workspace right now. They don't know if they're what kind of like jobs they're going to have, right, because it's changing. And if we're not there to really have like those conversations as connectors, what are the what is the role of like a leader in that capacity, right? I think that that role of a leader is a very generous role, and it's a very impactful role, and we have to reflect about that, I feel.
You mentioned that leaders today, many are ill-equipped to embrace that diversity conversation. And why is that the case? Why are they ill-equipped, and what do they need? Like, what's needed right now from your perspective, from on a leadership standpoint, to be able to embrace this diversity conversation and to create a culture that does embrace diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, I feel that starting from the why, from your question, I believe that it connects a little bit with vulnerability, and the fear of change. I would say, because I feel that people when they open up to conversations, they believe that they have to accept the other point of view. And as we were discussing before, it's not about accepting, it's just about understanding. And the other side, it's not that I feel, right, when you have like a different perspective and a different opinion, and I believe that I am a person who came from those roots of being different. The only thing that you want is to be understood, and I don't think that is still the moment. I think that it's not the it's being accepted, of course, the way I am, but being understood is more important. And I feel that right now, because of the change and the fear of what that represents, I just block myself, or leaders, they just block themselves to that conversation because they don't know what to do with that. What do I have to do with this information? Do I have to accept your point of view? I have to accept your practices in religions, and that's what diversity means? I don't think diversity means that, right? Diversity means accepting others the way they are, and to accept others the way they are so they can contribute to their full. It's just starts by understanding. And I think that one of the ways to deal with that, it's through storytelling. It's always a great way to break, to see that there is a person on the other side that went through struggles that you did, that went through the wins that you did as well, like the victories and everything, but had to go through those hurdles of life in order to be in the position that they are right now. And I think that when people, they start to see each other as another human being that also had gone through not the same things but the same topic of items in their lives, people are starting to connect with that figure that they believe that was so different from them, but not as much, because they are not that different. They just lived in different realities with different perspectives. And understanding who they are, it's actually a way for you to think about how your company can perform, how your products can perform, how your services need to be adjusted, because maybe you're missing out in that capacity, right? So I feel that it's actually a rich opportunity that we're having in order to enrich those conversations.
You mentioned how it's almost like a fear of vulnerability and a fear of change. It almost felt like that's what's holding people back, holding leaders back from, I'd say just holding people back from embracing other perspectives, other people, other points of view. And and so how do you foster that? How do you develop that? One thing you're sharing is storytelling. So, and understanding, really listening to understand and taking that, having the courage to do that. Um, are those the ways to start fostering that openness to change, that openness to being vulnerable? Because it seems like both of those sort of coincide. Like, how do you develop that as a leader? And how do you start bringing that into an organization in a very practical way?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because I think it's one of the challenges that diversity and inclusion faces right now. Instead of working through the core of what those conversations, how those conversations can happen, and how can we promote those conversations, I feel that organizations are working on the other way, having statistics around it. So being diversity means that I need to have a certain pool of a women, a certain pool of gender differentiation, or it's really bringing to statistics. So it's acting on actually the reverse, when you should be acting on the beginning of like the core of like what that, how can you promote that, because it's not hiring women or someone that has a different gender, but it's educating leaders to do good interviews without their filters, so they actually can see the other side. So you have to start from the beginning, right? Like a, it's like a start like a, by questioning ways of thinking. And to me is the best way of like doing that, to be honest, is developing leaders. There's no other way. You have like to bring leaders, because they're going to be the propellers of like cultural ways in your organization. They're going to be the propellers of like this is the way that like we work. Those are the principles that we are actually grounded, and we operate like that. But to have that functionality and those practices really operating with authenticity in an organization, it's really having those starting points, those conversations from start point, and not acting on the data, because that doesn't change the, because the person, even the person who were hired, different gender, different like everything, if they are not equipped to talk, they're not going to have like the same conversation. So it doesn't change to a certain degree, because they that person that was different and feeds the statistical needs that that company needed is not equipped necessarily to have like the same conversation with like everyone else. So that's my way of thinking. Like we have like to develop leaders to have conversations, to embrace the fear of like being different. And I feel that like actually our generation, this generation right now, is fully equipped in that capacity. If you have like conversations with them, they really accept others, the differentiation of like others way better to a certain degree than generation X's or boomers. Like they baby boomers, they accepted because they were raised in a different setting, right? So it would be great to have like a reverse mentorship, like in this sense. So our generation is actually fed through other generations, younger generations, of like how to deal with like how to have like those conversations better, because you guys have that better than us, like to a certain degree. And just being in that space, I think that it's a challenge for certain people. But this is the way. It's just opening the Pandora box in a way of like not without the only aspect that I would say that it's very important is the psychological safety around it, right? The fear of being retaliated, or the fear of like not being accepted, and what that causes. To me, that is a different layer of like this conversation that we're having, but it's a very important aspect as well.
You know, some of the pushback on DEI is that the through this sort of mandatory quota that needs to be facilitated with an organization of gender or culture or generation, that it's leading to a selection of people who are less qualified. And in a way, a, a bit of that pushback is justified, because here and is that instead of focusing on looking at what are the mental filters that are pushing out qualified candidates, you're looking to fit a quota when it's not about that, actually. And maybe it needs to be thought of in a different way, where it's like, how do we develop the interviewing skills? How to develop the leadership skills that are aware of the mental filters that are pushing out qualified candidates? And if anything, candidates that could provide a lot to the innovation, to the perspectives of a global market, to the ability to perform effectively. And it's so
Mhm.
interesting. The research is showing that, there's this really great research out of MIT that explores the performance potential of a team, called collective intelligence. And the first thing is the diversity within a team is so incredibly important for the performance potential of a team. and the ability to do conversational turn taking. So the ability to actually allow all voices to be heard. And the third component is your ability to look outside of your own perspective and to look through the eyes of another person to truly understand them. And those three things are essential for to enhance performance in teams. And so, I love what you were talking about there around the way to enhance and to embrace diversity at this point is not through some operational quota, but to really focus on leadership development, to understand the mental filters, to understand those things that are holding us back from being able to truly understand the people, the humans that we're interacting with. And once we could do that, it really starts from that why. Why do we want to embrace these different perspectives, different views, these different generations, cultures? And when we can do that, that can sort of unlock a whole new level of performance, a whole new level of connection in the workplace. And something I want to shift to now is really looking at that the safety and that this could bring there's a whole other topic is psychological safety, which has its own charged element to it too. But how do you create that sense of safety in others? And why is it important for us to foster that as leaders, um as leaders in teams, as coworkers?
Hmm.
Is it the same skill set that's required for diversity to
I don't I feel that there is collaborative like elements for sure, but it starts being empathetic, right? Like I think that like when empathy is not present, or it's not a will to a certain degree, that complicates things. Like that is it's something that it's hard to go around that. And to me that is it's going to your comments and psychological safety, it is like our obligation to do that, right? It is the world that we're leaving to our kids and to their kids. And our kids are not even wanting to have kids anymore because they don't want to watch the world ahead of them. um, and I feel that like if you're not embracing as a human person as a human, your willingness to understand the other side, we are not evolving in this planet as as the ways that we operate. um, I feel that there is a lot of things that we can do to get this better, to have like a better psychological safety and psychological safety environment at work. I was impressed when I was in Brazil about how, to a certain degree, the conversations about psychological safety are still the same as I hear here in North America, just like with different layers or depths around it. Over there, there is still a lot of like a social disparity, fear in those conversations, and hierarchy still has a very uh, much space in conversations, which decreases the level of comfort, right? Here in North America, my perspective is that like there is still a power struggle, there's, because I have like that power, like I cannot connect to others in that level because I know more to a certain degree.
so you mean
um
from power is that a I'm in a leadership position, therefore I
exactly.
have power and I
I
can't
know more.
connect.
I
I
know
know
more.
more, and
Exactly.
that creates that sense of hierarchy, but also creates almost like a command and control environment,
Command
which
and control. Yeah.
makes a person feel unsafe because they're being commanded, they're being controlled, and there's this sense of
Yeah.
I'm not safe.
The only difference is that my generation used to stay and get sick in an environment like that. The generation now, they don't stay, they leave, you know? And to me, and then that's the answer to your question. Do we want that? Do we want to still have like retention rates because we are not engaging with people, because we're not having conversations, because we're not equipped to have conversations? So what do? We just see the problem, like, because I always like to have like that practical lenses when I have like conversations around those things. When we are in an organization, we see a problem. What are the solutions that we can have like for that problem? We have such a difficulty to do the same thing with us as people, right? Because the problem is there, it's clear, we're not knowing yet how to have like those conversations. So how can we do that? I don't think that there is a one answer to your question, Michael, because I think that every organization is different. It's like a person, right? It is different, and they operate with a different set of principles and values, and you have to bring those values to that conversation in your organization. Because if you don't bring those values, those principles first, like, you're not engaging in a cultural perspective, you're losing in engagement, because you're not being authentic, you're not being genuine. And this generation, when they feel that unauthenticity, they leave, right? So to me is like a really going to that principles, to the executives, to the business owners, and changers like in this space that we're living and working, and say, what do you want from that? What is your responsibility of like that? Because it's not just leave seeing the boat navigate itself and going through through the currents, without saying, no, no, I have a say on that. I can have like better conversations. I want to have better conversations in my organization. I want to be more open. So I want people to voice their opinions, so we can have better problem solving, we can have better decision making, we can have all those things better. Because it's not only my way of seeing, it's like a having perspectives that it's not reachable to me, because it's not mine, right? And once you put like all those elements together into your problem solving, your decision making, and then I feel that like maybe we're talking two languages. We're talking about the language of productivity, that it's so important for organizations, but you're also talking about in a human perspective, that you're evolving the society that we have, in order to have better positive workplaces, that are people are not getting sick because they believe that they need to conform, right? There's no need to conformity. I believe nowadays, right? We Because people, they are refuting to conform, which uh, you know has itself a set of challenges that we need to think about it. Because either you're going to block like a generation to talk, and they're not going to engage with you anymore, or you actually have a good opportunity to minimizes the generation gaps, or all the diversity challenges that we and have better and more positive workplace environments.
You know, I think it's interesting. There's so much more choice that people have today, with a global interconnected world, especially post pandemic. There's hyperconnectivity and knowledge work. There's so much more choice. You can work in firms anywhere on the planet, from the comfort of your own home, uh, you know, per se, and in some industries. And so if people don't feel safe in an organization, they're gonna leave. They're gonna shift. And especially, like you said, these generations that have seen their parents burn out, and they don't want to relive that same pattern. There is this awareness in so many people, and it's so interesting how important it is to embrace it. And I want to share a little story of the importance of wisdom. It's so interesting now where I'm at in my life. my understanding of what it means to lead effectively has evolved immensely. For when I started, I was very lucky when I was early in my leadership journey. I was put into a leadership position where I was running a construction company when I was 19 years old. I had 6 teams on different sites working away, and one of the teams staged a walk off. They were done. They were done with it because I was pushing them too hard. I wasn't listening to them. I didn't know it at the time. I was just thinking I was running my business effectively. I was just driving these projects forward and pushing to get them done and doing everything that was required to do that. That was my idea of what being an effective leader was. And my father, who has been in business for a very long time, he stepped in and in the construction business. I didn't expect this from him. He goes, "You need to care for these people, and you need to take care of them, and you need to figure out whatever it's required to do it, but you need to go in and do that right now."
Mm-hmm.
And it was such an incredible teaching moment for me because I came to them and I took that stance of I'm gonna listen to you. And I want to really understand what is it that's causing you so much suffering that you're just willing to walk off. And from doing that, we were able to resolve everything, and they stayed on, and they became one of our best performing teams.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so interesting. So many of us might have these experiences and just still think that, well, no, we just need to be driving this forward and hard. And we may not see from a leadership perspective the impact that that might be having. And the research is showing that the cost of turnover, if you don't retain your employees who have incredible knowledge capital, that have experience and wisdom and history of your understanding of your organization, you're going to pay 1.5 to 2.5 or more times their salary to try find a new person to onboard them over a year to 2 years. You're losing an incredible amount of knowledge capital by not fostering an environment that retains them. And if you don't invest in supporting work-life balance and invest in taking care of the people around you, you're you're the cost of retention is massive. There's another research out of Deloitte that they shared that for every dollar you invest, there's over a 5 times sort of gain from every dollar that you spend in initiatives that support the well-being and work-life balance of your employees. So I think it's just so important. A lot of that comes with wisdom and overtime.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're able to be open to that, and it's fascinating to hear, what you're sharing around how important it is to take that empathetic stance to create that sense of safety. And you spent several years building culture and HR strategy at Rose Life Science. I know that they're one of the largest cannabis organizations. I know, especially in Canada, I believe like over 90% of the market is served by them. They're Health Canada licensed and regulated. And so maybe if you could share, what were some of the experiences that you had that informed and really maybe brought into highlight the importance of diversity, importance of creating
Mm.
a safe culture, especially in an industry that's highly stigmatized.
Oh yeah, like I think that I chose the experience. Rose came to me, and I chose like really like it was pick point because I love the challenge that that experience would represent in my career. And I feel that and I accepted that role because it was an opportunity to talk to embrace diversity from the ways of thinking at a start point, right? It was cannabis was legalized, like started legalization. The mindsets around was very, very negative. It was um, not well seen. People were afraid of like telling their parents that they were working for for cannabis organization. There were so many taboos that we needed to break in order to actually build a culture. The way that I enjoyed the conversation, and then I opened the conversation with Rose, it was because in the website it was that you could be who you are. That it was the reason why I decided to start talking to them. And because there was a huge feeling about that, that need, because we needed to bring different ways of thinking about cannabis itself, like even people who were not like afford the openness of like a legalization of cannabis. We needed to talk to everybody. We needed to talk to them as our collaborators in the organization, as companies or third parties that we would have to deal with, and the at the end of the day, the people who would consume cannabis in a different way. We needed to break all those boundaries, like in order to make us visible to a certain degree, without being able to talk about cannabis, because it's still not, you cannot talk, it's like tobacco. You cannot put a product, you cannot promote your product. um, my role as an HR VP obviously had the in and outs of authentic or regular role of like a HR VP. But on top of like that, I had to talk to organizations in Quebec and our competitors. It was the first time that we gathered thinkings, and that was from different uh, competitors, and the first time being together in a career space, that everybody was present. Not everybody, but like who decided to join. I had to have like those conversations, because it was the only way to make the industry viable in this capacity, is really opening the doors for conversations, right? And we were there already knowing that it was not accepted before. So we were the underdog, like in an industry. We were an industry that was not accepted, and we needed to be accepted, right? And I believe that the best way that we could we did that was telling the stories of everyone, why they are there, why they decided to join. It was because of like their own experience. Cannabis provided to them something medically oriented that was beneficial to their lives, and just by asking questions and listening to their answers, people around become more open, right? Because you're not necessarily changing my way of thinking right now, but at least you're providing a seed that can grow in different ways, and my thinking could be changed after that. It was a lot of like work like that, of like changing perspectives, changing mindsets. And the only way of like doing that is being empathetic to people and talking to people and opening the doors, and say, I love like your story, for instance, Michael, like, because it is what we need. It is like a leader or someone who said, I made mistakes throughout my life, but this is how I learned, right? And this is what mold me, like the person that I am right now, that you're engaging in, and that you like the conversations, and that you like what we are talking. It was not a product from one day to the other. It's like a continued, it's a combination of like failures, gains, traumas, wins, everything in that capacity. And listening to those stories, opening up like your hearts, like to those stories, it is like what I believe that we start need to embracing and promoting at work, right? It's to have conversations. I feel that like in organizations before, you needed just to tell people what to do, or this is the result that we wanted to achieve, but without that flexibility around of like what are the ways of like getting to that point. Is your way the best way? If by any chance we take a detour here, a detour there, would we be better in any capacity, in any learning, in any knowledge? Like you mentioned about knowledge, like imagine if you're not engaging with like your workforce, the knowledge you lose because it's so fast and changeable and adaptive right now. Look at how much you're losing to a certain degree. You're not only losing on training and rehiring, you're losing on knowledge, right? Which right now more than ever is becoming faster and faster. So if you lose that piece, how you going to connect, right? But I honestly, I feel that I'm very positive in my mindset because of like the next generation. I think that the next generation want to see those changes, want to see those things present in at their work, and if they find the ways, if they find the openness, like in order to to promote, to collaborate, to be listened, to have like a reverse mentorship, for instance, my gosh, like how much we can change in a positive way, right? How much we can impact in a positive way. It's not only about like it's not only about the hypocrisy of like doing things out of like numbers, out of like statistics. It's because that's the empathy and the authenticity around, right? Like it's actually seeing that I want to see that difference in my workforce because it is better, because it promotes better results, and at the end of the day people are happier if they do that. So it is a win-win-win solution to me. And yes, it requires work because it's we're talking about human perspectives and very, you know, stagnant ways of like being yourself and operating. But I believe that once people experience that change, like you experience the change when your father went there and said like you had to care about people, when you experience how different was to demonstrate care to them, what did you get, did you have in return, and how that environment changed for you, that's when you change because there is an experience around it.
Hmm. It's so interesting. The cost of a bad culture in an organization could be so incredibly costly in an industry that its recruitment is so difficult. Like in cannabis and all these other industries where people could be hesitant to work in that industry itself, and the amount of education that you have to put in to bring in those people and to create that sense of trust. There's a lot that can be learned from that in terms of the value of storytelling to show, hey, this is who we are. This is how we embrace all people. This is we really want to understand. We really want to be empathetic. We want to show you and create this space where you feel that you can thrive here and be who you are. It's really interesting, just that tagline, how
Yeah.
important it is from a strategy perspective to create that safety, because the cost of losing one individual can be incredibly costly. And what I find really, really interesting right now, what you said around what is the cost of the knowledge that you're losing by not creating a safe space for people, by not embracing different perspectives, when right now, really to lead in this age of AI, that is a game changer. That is table stakes. You cannot not take in different perspectives,
Yeah.
because those are the perspectives that are going to change how we prompt, how we find the information that we normally wouldn't find. That creativity comes from those different perspectives. And if the space isn't safe that we're working within, We're losing the comfort that people need for their minds to be at their most creative, most open, most generative, right? And
Yeah.
so it's so important to see that value right now. And so, you know, Gabby, you've led across industries, countries, and generations. And I'm really interested, like, around some of the mindsets that influenced how you lead right now. Like how you shared how, your experience as an immigrant shaped your leadership style. I'd love to hear more about that as well, and about a mother of four boys.
Yes, yes.
How, and about neurodivergence, and how did that inform your leadership and inclusion? I would love to, maybe you could just share a little bit about your
Yeah.
story there.
100%. If we had this opportunity to have like this conversation, and I'm extremely proud of like that path, and I'm very happy that I can say right now that I'm extremely proud of like that path, like because it wasn't the case always, right? Being an immigrant is a very interesting status, because you leave. I became my grandparents, right? Like when my grandparents came to Brazil from Portugal, being an immigrants, and I was educated with the mindset of like hard work, of like what that represents, like the work ethics and being present, and all that. That was very very rewarding in my career, because I think I always showed up like in this sense. At the same time, I had my life in Brazil. I was already, engaged. I was working in a very creative company. It was a media company, like a newspaper, TV, and radio. So creativity was part of like that journey. So I thankfully had that cultural experience in Brazil, and also working in consulting in Brazil. Um, and being from Latin America and coming from North America, with like the ambition of like a very young psychologist who wanted to bring positive environments to the workplace. That was my mission. That's why I decided and chose not be a clinical psychologist, to be a psychologist operating in workspaces, because I felt that there was a huge opportunity to have an impact in this sense, in a greater in a greater capacity, in my view at that time. So I studied, but when I came here, I was nothing. I was no one. I was Nobody knew the company that I worked for. Nobody knew the impact that that company had, like in Rio de Janeiro, in Brazil. I had uh, to conform in that when I came, right? And that was a learning by itself. I noticed that I couldn't be who I am entirely, because it was considered different. I had an accent. I had, I continually do make mistakes when I speak. It's not my mother tongue. I have three languages right now, and definitely make more mistakes in each one of like them every day. But I had to prove to myself that I am a person with a brain and capabilities regardless where I live, right? And I can bring I can bring something different to the table. That is something that is resilience in being an immigrant, right? Because you have that perspective that nobody knows me here, nobody knows where I came from, nobody knows the school that I studied, the neighborhood that I lived, the neighbors that I had. So you become like something unknown, different. And not necessarily, it's way easier for me to connect to that person, that I understand what they're coming from, than you, who have to explain your story. I don't have time for that, right? So having to live through that story made me realize how important it is to listen to people, because they have a story to tell, and they have a lot of capabilities to share. And because I believe I was like that person, and I brought knowledge and capabilities, even though I came from a different environment, even though I came from a different way of thinking to a certain degree, and raised differently as well. I think because I embraced that life as an immigrant, as a woman, as like someone who has dyslexia as well, bringing all those components to my life made me realize how important it is to connect to people, how it's important to understand who they are, because they can bring so much to my life. That exchange of like my gosh, how interesting is your story, because I learned something from your story. And I'm not talking about mine specifically, I'm talking about that setting of like understanding each other is incredibly rich, right? And yes, it helped me immensely in a professional way. That made me the person I am, because I had to go through those hurdles of not being known, not having the perfect accent in the planet, making mistakes. I had to overcome those hurdles in order to be who I am and to share to others. And that's a little bit of like what I really would like to embrace is good leadership in this planet, because I feel that it's a game changer when you open the doors for empathetic ways of like dealing with like the everything that you have to do in your life, not only at work but with your neighbor, with your school, your community. When we see each other, it's a game changer in our day to day, and it's such a positive way to a certain degree of living our lives, that I hope that we as leaders in this generation, in this capacity, we can do that like to other generations, because I think that is the need right now. This generation felt very, very alone, and in their own spaces. We only can help each other in order to navigate for the future, and to navigate way better, right? So to me, embracing the stories, embracing the difference is what makes us way better. It's what makes us take better decisions, and have way better outcomes, and the outcomes that we envisioned, because we're not only talking about acting on data, we're talking with reality on the in perspective.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Gabby. I think there's so much that we can just learn from listening to your story in terms of keeping that open mind and to listening with empathy and in a way of understanding that can really not only enhance how we lead, but also just how we live and how we live together as a humanity. And in particular, just knowing that we're on the same path, that we have the same struggles, that we have gone through in our own way, whatever that is, these hurdles and challenges and learnings to be where we're at. And there's so much immense value in that. And the unique ways that we've come to that informs how we see the world and the ideas that we bring and the value and how we contribute and show up and the unique ways that we can sort of almost like flavor our lives by working together and connecting together, and that can enhance in incredible ways our organizations, our teams, and our relationships. And so I'm really grateful for these insights that you've shared with us. And so if how can our listeners connect with you or follow your work moving forward? I know
No,
that you've recently launched Arise, a consulting firm. Yeah, so how can our listeners stay connected with
they
you?
can definitely follow my LinkedIn page, Gabi Loureiro, and arise.bet. Also, they have an opportunity to go to the website and make a connection either via LinkedIn or just sending out a note. Arise is alive exactly to bring those components that we discussed, like into a very different perspective in workplace environments and bringing positive workplace environments by developing their leaders and focusing in developing their leaders with wellness and lifestyle medicine in perspective, because I think that by seeing the whole individual, and then we equip leaders in totality actually to become their whole, like their whole potential, and with that they definitely are able to impact the work environment in a positive way for their collaborators, for their teams that are working there. So that's the mission of Arise, that just started as a baby like this year, and I'm very very excited with the journey ahead, because I think it's a very meaningful one for me.
Lovely. Well, thank you
And I
again.
and I wanted to thank you and the team, like, for connecting with me. I was the experience was amazing. We had such nice conversations before coming to the recording, and to me is an opportunity. Like, it really connects with like what we discussed today. It's connecting with people in a different capacity, and helping each other in order to have like a a better world for generations to live out there.
Oh, lovely. Well, that is definitely the ethos that we live at the Mindful Institute. And here in Leading Minds Revealed, it's really this is the intention, right? Is how can we see these inner ways that we can lead more effectively and optimize our leadership. And so, thank you again so much, Gabby, for joining us. Uh, it was rich in storytelling, in understanding the inner workings of effective leadership, from inclusivity and openness of perspective and openness to change and sense of safety. And I know that our listeners will take so much from your story. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
And so this brings us to the end of another episode of Leading Minds Revealed. We'll see you on the next one.
Leading Minds Revealed podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and see you on the next episode.